Watch this.
It's a battle of the governors. Once again, when Little's away, McGeachin will play with the executive orders. It took mere hours for her to issue her latest. We break down what's happening at our state house. They wanted to help end the pandemic, but the vaccine trial for which they volunteered never got approved in the United States. Well, today, state health officials give some guidance on what those individuals should do next. School is canceled, but not necessarily because of COVID. That's what one school district announced, saying there are not enough qualified bus drivers. It's a shortage that's not necessarily the pandemic's fault. Okay, I've spent the last hour or so trying to figure out what this moment is like. What analogy could best express what is happening with executive leadership in Idaho right now? Several suggestions from social media, some people calling it a circus, or it's like divorced parents in a custody case. But the best one, I think, is the analogy of, parents that are out of town and the babysitter they hired just said, sure, we can have cookies and cereal for every meal. Bedtime? What's that? Rated R movies? Oh, yeah. I don't know. Maybe one of those would work. It's really all over the place. It's really hard to pin down as well because this has never happened in the state of Idaho, which is something we said the last time it happened in the state of Idaho. But here we are once again with the governor out of the state, and the lieutenant governor, in her role as acting governor, has issued another executive order. This one to amend Governor Little's original order that banned any sort of vaccine proof by a state agency. At 3:43 this afternoon, today, as acting governor, Janice McGeachin tweeted this out. I fixed Governor Little's executive order on vaccine passports to make sure that K-12 schools and universities cannot require vaccinations or require mandatory testing. I will continue to fight for your individual liberty. And it really wasn't until, going on to say no department agency required as a condition of accessing state agencies, state services, or facilities. That's kind of where that went on. And it wasn't long after that. At 3, we're going to go with Little's response. At 3:53, this is what the response was from Governor Little. Just shortly after that, I will be rescinding and reversing any actions taken by the lieutenant governor when I return. He went on to say, I'm in Texas performing my duties as the duly elected governor of Idaho. I have not authorized the lieutenant governor to act on my behalf. Now, that being said, she is authorized because of the Idaho State Constitution. But before I even left the state, Governor Little went on, Lieutenant Governor unabashedly requested information from the Adjutant General to deploy our National Guard to the border. Yes, she wrote a letter to Major General Gorshak at the Idaho National Guard asking, basically to send some troops to the border because, as she said, the situation is continuing to deteriorate. And to protect our state from drugs and human trafficking as acting governor, on Wednesday, she says, I'm prepared to answer their call because she says, they are calling for their help. As of Wednesday, my constitutional authority as governor affords me the power of activating the Idaho National Guard. And I'm requesting information from you on the steps needed for the governor to activate that National Guard. Gorshak responded with basically one paragraph. Thanks for your letter. But they requested law enforcement. The National Guard is not law enforcement, as you are aware. They are not a law enforcement agency, and under Idaho law enforcement is provided by the Idaho State Police. So she was kind of a little errant in that. It just keeps going on. But here we are with this happening. And the fun isn't over yet for Lieutenant Governor McGeachin because she now has to go to court, and that's happening on next week. We still have to make it through Wednesday, but it took a lawsuit in order for her to get in front of a judge because she is being asked to be held in contempt of court for not turning over documents. It took 6 months for her to do so. That'll happen next week. Yep, and they could drop it. It could be dismissed. It could go forward, but you can see why she did ask for a one-time $50,000 boost to her budget to cover the legal fees incurred with this case. Again, we are only into Tuesday this week. The governor's only been out of town for hours. So what's in store for Wednesday before Governor Little returns? We'll just have to wait and see. Well, more questions than answers seem to be a theme from the last 18 months. Asking questions, though, is good because it helps us figure out what we don't know, right? Knowing, as that is, as they say, I should say, is half the battle. I think G.I. Joe said that, right? When it comes to COVID, we're still learning a lot. So when we see some of your questions that you sent in during the show, sometimes the first time we've ever thought about that idea, and so we want to find out the answer for you. And we got a lot of questions recently on vaccine types, mixing vaccines with all these boosters starting to become available and eligible. And Joe, You have an answer to that question because this is something that a lot of people have asked. You know, if you got the Pfizer, could you be available for another vaccine with the Johnson & Johnson? AstraZeneca's out there as well.
Yeah. There's a lot going on in our community right now, Brian, and there's a lot of people that did those vaccine trials. So let me set the stage real quickly, and we'll fast forward here. But for starters, let's start with this. The Treasure Valley was home to a COVID vaccine test from AstraZeneca early this year, late last year. And the vaccine is still being studied around the world, but it is not approved for use in the United States. So questions have emerged from that group, the AstraZeneca trial group. They want to know if they could now go get another vaccine from a different company that is approved in the U.S., like Moderna or Pfizer. Same goes for getting a booster shot. Now, the AstraZeneca trial participants are curious if they can go get a Pfizer booster shot. There's no other boosters available right now. It was honestly very brave for people to sign up for a vaccine trial, but now they're telling us they have concerns about getting enough protection from COVID. Now, interestingly enough, in other countries like Europe, there are people mixing and matching, so to speak, different vaccines from different companies. First, I asked state epidemiologist Dr. Christine Hahn about those topics today. First, here's her insight on if the U.S. could approve mixing different vaccines and boosters.
There's obviously the two issues again: safety and efficacy. Is it going to bump up your antibodies at the rate that they hope it does? And is it safe to do this? So that data is going to be discussed in October. I've seen a little bit of it already in some of my work. And I think it looks promising, and we might get a recommendation that it is okay to mix and match. But for the moment, that is not available. But in a few weeks, we may hear differently. So stay tuned on that.
All right, heading back to people who are in a vaccine trial like AstraZeneca, who are now hoping to get a booster from Pfizer or possibly Moderna or Johnson & Johnson in the near future. Here's advice from Dr. Hahn if you were part of a vaccine trial and now are interested in going outside that.
Say, I don't want to be part of this trial anymore. I don't, as long as you're in a trial, you want to follow the rules, right? If they're studying the AstraZeneca vaccine, you don't go get another vaccine secretly. But if you really feel strongly that you want to consider getting, let's say, a booster with Pfizer, once this mix and match data is out there, you will then need to go to your trial folks and let them know that you are probably exiting the trial to, let's say, go get a booster. So for people in clinical trials, I tell them it's really up to them to decide if they want to stay in their trial and stick with what they've started with that, or if they want to exit the trial and do what they think is best for their health, which is totally okay.
So great advice there from state epidemiologist Dr. Christine Hahn. Long story short, Brian, we're going to learn a lot more about vaccines and different vaccines and how they interact in the coming weeks.
And just because you were in a trial doesn't mean you can't go get a different vaccine.
Correct.
Just talk to your doctor, of course. All right, thanks, Joe. We've talked about the lack of employees throughout this entire pandemic, and recently there's been a big lack of school bus drivers. For one school district, it's actually getting worse. Yesterday, the Gooding School District announced they were forced to cancel school today because of a, quote, lack of qualified bus drivers. We want to know what that meant because that, kind of had a little hitch to it. This afternoon, they announced the school is also going to be canceled for the rest of the week because of that. The shortage, though, isn't because of the pandemic, as Katya Stepovic explains.
The school playgrounds are quiet, the crosswalks deserted, and the buses sit idle in the bus barn after Gooding Elementary, Middle School, and High School shut their doors.
Our hope is that Monday we can be in school again.
Spencer Larson is the Gooding School district supervisor who ordered this messaging to be sent out to all parents, students, and staff, stating that due to a continued lack of qualified bus drivers, schools will be closed for the rest of the week.
It, I guess, really started at the beginning of the year, over the summer when we were coming back. We didn't have enough bus drivers, period, and so we had to condense and consolidate routes. We went from 11 routes to 8.
But the pandemic isn't all to blame for the lack of qualified bus drivers at Gooding schools. Last year, Larson says the district purchased the buses from the Cheney Bus Company because the owner was retiring. The district put out a busing contract for bid and got no responses. So their only option, if they wanted to keep providing transportation, was to purchase the buses themselves.
Last year was the first year that the district has run their own busing. We had contracted with Cheney Bus for decades. And so this was all new. And, unfortunately, there were some bus drivers that were also ready to retire. We've tried to hire drivers. It has not been easy.
To make things even harder, a recent spot inspection uncovered that while all current Gooding bus drivers do have the proper CDL licenses, none of them participated in the annual safety training, which has to be done to meet all legal requirements, disqualifying all current bus drivers.
Part of our decision to cancel school when we didn't have any drivers that were qualified, this is to give us time to make sure all the necessary paperwork's in place, the trainings are in place. We have to follow state laws as well. We just weren't doing that apparently. And so we're putting things in place so that we can be compliant.
The district has never had to run their own transportation system before, and Larson says mistakes happen, and he's happy that it was caught now. But an anonymous viewer who sent a tip to KTVB says this could have been prevented. This is what they claim.
The reason for having no qualified drivers is because the superintendent canceled training that's required to have qualified drivers twice. He declined the offers to reschedule. Now 0 drivers for the district are qualified. So tell me a little bit about that statement.
Well, I didn't read those statements. I'm not going to get into that actually. I know what happened and I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus, so we're just not going to go there.
But it sounds like that might be part of the reason that you guys are experiencing this shortage right now.
Well, I mean, the reason we have the shortage is because we didn't, and of qualified drivers, yes, is because, that training didn't happen. That's the reason.
And were you the superintendent at that time when the training was supposed to happen?
Yep.
Regardless of the mishap, Larson says the training that didn't happen must take place during the rest of the week while classrooms sit empty.
We're doing everything we can to get them caught up, and this does not help that. It's unfortunate that we're in this position, but I just want to thank everyone for their patience and understanding as we work through this.
And even with the drivers that they have right now, they are down by about half. So they need at least 6 more new hires. And we will link that job application on our website, ktvb.com.
And they could be up and running by the end of the week if that happens.
Monday is the soonest they could be back.
All right. Thank you, Katya. Yesterday, after we introduced you to Mike Tatro, a 25-year teacher who walked away from the job he loved because he had had enough of the disrespect and toxicity of the profession, we had a lot of you message us with similar stories and sympathies. Nearly 36 of you texted in. Now, there was no way that we could share all of them at the end of the show yesterday, so we decided we would share them today to let you know there's a lot of people, teachers out there, who agree education in Idaho is in crisis.
Amber wrote, "Another teacher here looking for a way out. And it has nothing to do with the children. I even like the parents. It's that I have 2 master's degrees and numerous certifications, and my children still qualify for Medicaid because I make so little. Pay professionals a professional wage, Idaho, she says. It's criminal how we are treated and taken advantage of. Mike and Haley wrote in at 5:25 yesterday to say, my wife, also 25 years a teacher, has said she's done after this year. Just talked to her, and she's not home yet. Monday, how can I be behind already, she said. Ray from Boise wrote, I'm a teacher, and it was good to know I'm not the only one thinking those same things and wanting to leave. Jenna is also from Boise. She says she is this close. Being a teacher has been so incredibly hard these last 2 years. Mike is so right. The devious licks, the unmasked students, lack of subs. Just today I was informed 6 more of my students have COVID. Good teachers are leaving. I love teaching, but the work is monumental, and my admin doesn't believe us when we ask for more time, more support, and more help with students' social and emotional needs. My soul is tired. Debbie said she could relate to the teacher we talked to. I left in 2021 because teaching became hard. As much as I love my kids and walking into my classroom every day, I just couldn't take the bull anymore. I taught for 25 years, and I cried when I walked out. Teaching is hard, Sean said. It's not a part-time job and requires 10 to 12 hours per day when school is in session, and you only actually get to take the summers off if you can afford it. Most teachers can't, even though they do need a break. Teachers are educated professionals that need to be properly compensated. Step up, Idaho, and make education a priority, he says. We also heard from those who reluctantly walked away like Mr. Tatro did. Like Lori, who said she resigned 2 weeks ago and is still struggling with not feeling strong enough emotionally to continue. I felt I was not being heard about my concerns, with no reply from the district on any of my questions. I'm still heartsick with my decision, but also know it was the right one. Thoughts and prayers to all the teachers who still have the faith. Julie left after 27 years. She says, for all the reasons Mr. Tatro mentioned, I would add one more. The overreach of our state legislators who don't want government in our lives, but tried to tell me what and how to teach for all of those years. Ironic, isn't it? She asks. Carl in Payette concurs. As a retired teacher, I feel for today's teachers. The pandemic has made it tough enough. However, school boards are not supportive. Politicians think we're trying to bring in non-existent beliefs, and parents are on opposite sides of their shots and masks. We want to teach and keep our students safe. However, we somehow became the enemy. I have no desire to return to teaching, even though there is strong need for subs and bus drivers. I don't feel the public supports education to even work part-time at a profession I enjoyed. Carl asks Idahoans to wake up. These people are responsible for our future. Steve says he and his wife taught and coached in Idaho for more than 60 years combined. In 2005, they both retired for the same reasons mentioned by Mike Tatro. Idaho was last in education then, he says, and nothing has changed in the 15 years since. The only thing I still miss is the kids. To which Jim adds, is it any surprise that Idaho is 51st in the nation behind all other states and D.C. in per-student funding? And they have been for the last 5 years, according to the National Education Association. Christine is another retired educator. She says it breaks her heart what is happening to our education system. Yes, teaching is a labor of love, but you can't feed your family on love. And the lack of appreciation is a slap in the face to our dedicated teachers. Doug in Nampa and his wife both retired, and their hearts also go out to our teachers. He says they couldn't do it anymore either. Lip service gives nothing to our education system, and we should all be concerned. Drawing attention to the distinction, Matt in Caldwell wrote, way to go, Idaho. Fill up those hospitals and empty the schools of good teachers. Great combination. But there was some sense of encouragement. Bernadette is in her 28th year of teaching, and she wanted to give a shout out to all her colleagues who are hanging in there and the ones who have left the profession. Don't let political stressors get to you. At the end of the day, she says, we go home and know our professionalism and expertise is needed now more than ever. Be proud of all your contributions, short-term or long-term, Bernadette says. That's our talent. Irreplaceable teacher.
And that was only about half of them. Several of you thanked Mike for getting this conversation going and asked us if we could keep it going. The legislative session begins on January 10th. All right, when it comes to promoting and protecting trees, Boise's right up there with the Lorax. I mean, it isn't the city of trees for nothing. All you have to do is look across the valley from the foothills or while you're flying in from any direction. Boise seems to be an oasis of trees in this high desert. And sure, the city has taken down its fair share over the years of trees to make room for growth. Maybe, but there's one tree that has stood more than the test of time. 19 years ago, John Miller first told us about this tree. This giant tree that hardly goes unnoticed if you've ever driven down Cole Road just north of Fairview. This topiary can't be topped for outlasting the threat of growth. In fact, it's firmly planted right in the middle of it in this 208 Redial.
Once upon a time, there was this tree.
What kind of tree is it?
You know, I don't know.
No, I have no idea.
I'm not sure. I think it might be a maple.
It's just a beautiful tree is all.
It's the most identifying mark about where we live.
You just say make a left where there's a tree growing out of the road there. It's a great reference point.
Yeah, you don't see that every day.
No.
But the folks on West Westwood Drive couldn't picture their neighborhood without it. What do you think would happen if somebody came along and tried to cut it down?
I wouldn't like it.
Wouldn't let them do it.
This is like the luckiest tree ever, because while the whole world and Margaret Wynn have grown up and older around it,
Well, this used to be a farm.
the old tree, whatever kind it is,
It's a street tree.
it stood its ground.
Hopefully it stays that way, because I've heard horror stories that they're going to widen the road up there.
And we hold our breath every time there's a survey team going down the whole road.
Yeah, so if anybody ever came and tried to take your tree, you'd put up a big fuss. They'd have to come knock on Mrs. Wynn's door. Yeah, and you aren't a big fan of TV. That's why we're so far away from the camera. But
Yes.
you're very near and dear to your tree.
Yes,
Yeah.
we want the tree to stay there if we can.
John Miller,
I think it's pretty cool.
Idaho's News Channel 7.
Well, good news, the tree still stands. That widening that was mentioned in that story from 19 years ago was completed about 4 years ago with the new and improved Cole-Fairview intersection. But the tree withstood that. I dropped by the neighborhood today. Nobody answered the door at Margaret Wynn's house. But I did talk to Lori. She's a woman who's lived on Westwood Drive since 1998. She told me the widening may have taken some of her neighbor's yard, but it wasn't going to take that tree. She said she went to the ACHD meeting when they discussed the construction project just to show support and make sure that tree was not going to be pushed out. That's what it looks like today. Lost a few more leaves, a little bit of color this time of year. And yep, it still stands. She even thought it was designated as a city park. That one little tree for its protection, thus making it the smallest park in Boise. But I checked, it's not. Boise Parks and Rec told me while the tree is in right-of-way and maintained by the forestry team, it's not a city park. But here's to the tree team for keeping that tree going all these years. All right, we started the show today talking about Lieutenant Governor Janice McGeachin taking the reins of governor because, well, Brad Little's out of town down at the Mexican border, checking things out there. She immediately issued an executive order to which Brad Little tweeted out, "I will be rescinding and reversing any actions taken by Lieutenant Governor when I return." To which Rusty says the state needs to change the state constitution to prevent turning over controls to Lieutenant Governor just because the governor's out of state. It's not the 30s or 40s. Communication with today's technology does not warrant this chaos, he says. And this is probably the best analogy that I've heard today when it comes to what is happening at the State House. Lieutenant governors like Frank Burns on MASH. When the colonel was away, remember that show? Yeah, of course. Major Burns would abuse his powers and cause havoc at the MASH unit, says Barb in Cuna. That's a good one.